You'll never have to stand in line to play Double Dragon again. Welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
And I'm Sean.
And that's it.
That's just us today.
When was the last time?
It's been a while.
It has been a minute.
You know, like, I always find these to be much more intimate and sensual, especially when, like, the studio lights dim a little bit.
A lot of people have written into the show and
they don't
said,
like these.
Yeah, that they prefer it when all four of us are on the show.
There are some things we can't control.
So if you don't feel that way and you're like, oh, I love it when it's just Mike and Sean, maybe write in to make us feel better about ourselves.
We'll just cut the rest of them out of the show.
Yeah, I don't see. Yeah. In fact, we'll fill it in with just more of, like, a different persona of me and a different persona of you, and that'll still get us to 4.
Yeah, totally. And that's all that they really want is 4 voices.
Would you be like, yeah, that's all they were ever asking for, was I like it better when more people talk, all at the same time, incoherently.
We do that a lot.
So, Sean, today we're playing Double Dragon.
True.
That's made by Technos Japan. And if you may remember, Technos Japan has released one other game on the NES for us so far. Do you know what that game might be?
Renegade.
Renegade, right. The other beat-em-up game, the only other one really.
The proto beat-em-up.
Proto beat-em-up, yeah. This game is very much the spiritual and technological successor to Renegade. And I think we're going to see that a lot, but that makes me think, like, well, we only played Renegade, like, that was only like a couple episodes ago, right?
I think it was more than a couple, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm saying like maybe 20 episodes ago, if you,
sure,
you know. So it hasn't been much time, but you can see in Double Dragon that a lot of improvements have been made in this genre.
It's like they listened to the episode,
right? They did. They went back. They listened to the episode, went back in time, and said, "Oh, we could make a better game. Let's call it Double Dragon."
Yeah,
and then movies, cartoons later. Now
everything ensues. Yeah.
Just for those of you that don't know, Double Dragon is a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you attack enemies on screen with punches and kicks, and eventually you can learn other things too.
Yeah.
In the arcade version, you just had them all already. But the important thing here is that makes this a little different than, say, Renegade, is that it's a true, like, side-scroller from left to right where you have to clear the enemies on the screen and continue moving for, like, forward progression. Whereas in Renegade, you were stuck to a screen and then you move to, like, another screen to face the next
This is
wave.
like the codifier of the actual genre that you're thinking of when you say beat 'em up.
Right. This is really close to, like, Streets of Rage level of the beat 'em up genre.
Yeah.
Which will eventually, like, give everybody their official definition of what a beat 'em up
and all those
should be.
bad dudes.
Yeah. I'm a pretty bad dude.
I know.
But are you a bad enough dude to rescue the president?
Always.
We shouldn't have spoiled that before that episode, but we'll get back to that. I don't think we really need to do any preliminary talking here because we set up a lot of what a beat 'em up can and should be in the Renegade episode. So let's just get right into it. Double Dragon, you boot up the game. How you feeling?
After I go through that, what seems like way too many options for the beginning, I get into the game and I see some very effective motivational cutscene to go forward where somebody just like punches the girlfriend in the stomach and then you're off.
Yeah, and it's good graphics for the NES.
Yeah, this is very impressive.
Yeah, so I'm already like engaged. I think it's very clear that there's a very simple story to be told, and now you just go right into the fun. And the fun, of course, is punching and kicking everybody that stands in your way.
Yeah.
Only people that stand in your way ever show up in this game. The streets have been cleared for everybody but villains. How did you feel about just like your general attacking power?
This felt like, just from the weight of the punches, the rate of movement, like this just felt like how it felt it should.
Yeah, everything connects very easily. I'd say there's a couple of like later moves that feel like, that probably should have hit. When it's mostly
like directional inputs and stuff like that.
Right. But for the most part, like a punch is satisfying because there's also animation for both parties. Like you, when it happens to you, when you get punched, and when you punch an enemy, there's a satisfying like connection that happens that registers a hit.
Yeah.
It knocks them back or knocks you back.
And that split-second delay between the punch and their like slow motion fallback, that just feels right. It has crunchiness and it has weight to it, so it feels good.
Yeah, and the progression of the enemies, I mean, you meet a lot of what you're going to see through most of the game just in the first level.
Yes.
And that actually didn't bug me because it's only 4 missions, and it does get pretty tough. So I didn't mind having not so much like new encounters to deal with that were going to be like incredibly hard things that would then set me back to stage 1 again.
Yeah. I think that there isn't really much tutorializing here, but they do give you like the easier enemies to begin with, and that's, just typical video game logic.
Yeah, the one thing they do tutorialize, but they don't ever spell out for you, so if you don't own a manual or don't have a manual, and that's jumping. There comes a point, I think in stage 2, where a broken bridge is in your way, and if you walk up to it, you'll fall into the river. But if no, you can't get out. You'll lose your life.
Okay.
But they never told you like about jumping, and you never had to jump before that. You had to climb fences and stuff. Yeah. So it was a weird moment where I never used the jump buttons before, but I said, okay, well, there has to be a way for me to jump. It turns out you just push A and B together, but I had to refer to the manual for that.
So you didn't read the manual to start?
I did not read the manual to start because I assumed and was correct in thinking that one button would be to punch and one button would be to kick.
That was the problem in the prior game.
Yes. That in the prior game, for those of you that can remember, you had to face it, depending on which way you were facing, that would do the different inputs. Yeah. So punching and kicking were tied to, like, in the right, if you were facing the right, A would punch, but if you were facing the left, A would kick.
But basically, B would always attack to the right, and A would always attack to the left, and it just depended on whether it was going to be a punch or a kick.
Right, right. So
it was still confusing as hell.
They fixed that a lot, and I think they also kind of fixed that that Z-axis that we were complaining about, because maybe it's just because the graphics are better, but I was able to better understand if I was just going to punch nothing or the character. And maybe it was just more forgiving, too, in terms of a hitbox. Like, you didn't have to be exactly lined up with, like, this. Because if you think about it, if you're pixels, right?
You're pixels, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, like, you're just flat. You know, it's like really these strips of paper, like fighting each other. So you have to be like perfectly aligned for it to happen. And this game's a little more forgiving than Renegade was.
Totally. Do you think that if you're pixels, like, do you just see like a line, or do you see in 2 dimensions as well?
Somebody made a 3D version or a first-person version of Super Mario Brothers where you see through Mario's head, and it is like terrifying, and also what somebody would dream like. You know, nobody would actually ever have a good time experiencing that. Yeah, in 2D land, being pixels, but you know, at least now we have the technology. We didn't have it back then, but now we have the technology to see what that would feel like.
Science.
I'll try to link that in the show notes for everybody. That's actually a really cool thing. And there's another cool thing, if we're just going to get on tangents here for a minute. There's this like 3D NES emulator that that like automatically calculates for certain games that they've programmed to make 3D. So this way it plays better.
Sometimes it gets a little like mindfucky. Yeah.
I think only like there's like maybe Metroid and Mega Man are like the 2 games that they've really spent time on, like figuring out how to make all the pixelated elements work in 3D. Yeah. But otherwise, if you just throw like a random game in there, I don't even know if it'll take it.
It might try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that we haven't talked about yet with attacking, though, is the leveling up system.
Yes.
Now, this is non-existent in the arcade version. In the arcade version, you already had everything in your repertoire, and you just kind of like figured it out by either like looking around on the panel of the arcade, it would show you all the moves, or you would just do them, you know, naturally by button mashing. This game doesn't spell out for you the leveling up system. It's based on your hearts.
Yes.
Down at the bottom left. So there's no real sense of like levels. It's just like, oh, now I have more hearts, I think, right? Like
so basically you have a score, and that just counts up normally. And then that's in the bottom right. And then the bottom left, you have this other number that goes up every time you land a hit. And once you hit a certain amount, once you get to a certain number, you get another heart. And that heart is basically leveling up. and with it comes a new move that you can do. It doesn't say like new move acquired or anything like that. You just know that like, oh, this is the second heart move. And the whole concept, I don't really know why it's in the game, because there are only so many enemies that you fight before getting at least to like level 3. And so I think that like everybody, unless you're more efficient, if you're more efficient, you're going to get less hearts.
Right.
So I don't know what like the point of this was, but it's there.
Yeah, I think just to go over it for a second, you have punch, kick, jump, and headbutt available to you right at the beginning. I love headbutt.
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then like level 2 comes around, and no additional inputs are required, but now you have the uppercut and a roundhouse kick on stunned opponents.
Yes.
I just feel like, it seems like this was added to make the NES version a little harder because of the other limitations of the game that we'll get into. But there's no reason why, like, you couldn't have those abilities at the beginning. And it doesn't feel like it doesn't, because there's no like awesome screen that tells you about your newly acquired techniques, or like you don't go to like a sensei who teaches you these things, because it just happens randomly. All of a sudden you'll just notice like, oh, I have the uppercut.
Yeah. Like now your combo looks a little different, and that's the only thing that really tips you off if you haven't read the manual. It does get a lot more, like you get a lot more useful things down the road, but you have to figure out how to use them. Yeah.
And I think for what it's worth though, these additional moves, I wouldn't mind if they were all available from the beginning, but they are great to have in this game. It's a very welcome addition to this whole thing, because we're so used to, even in like action games and stuff like that, only having like the A button does one thing, and maybe you get like different objects, so it's treated slightly different. And then the B button is another thing, and then your D-pad up is to jump. So to have like a lot of different mechanics here, to be able to like have a thing to grab somebody, and then another button to throw them, and then when they're on the ground, you can face punch them. Like, to have all that stuff is really cool.
It makes it feel more like a complete game instead of whatever Renegade sort of was.
Right. But you're kind of like leveling up so fast because it's only 4 missions that it just feels like, how are you learning this stuff? Like shouldn't you have just had all this to begin with? Like, if there's only 4 missions, is it really bad if I learn the elbow move from the beginning?
No, I mean, it takes like 10 minutes to get to like 5. Like, I don't.
Yeah. I think level 5 is very easy to get to, and then like level 6 requires some.
But that's only because by level 6, you're probably on mission 3.5, right, and it's a pain in the ass now. So I think that this is one of those artificial barriers that I wish they wouldn't have even thrown in there. Mm-hmm. I can see why they did, but I don't think it was a just reason.
Yeah, it also feels like the timer was another thing that was not necessary in a home version of this game. There's no reason to tell me that I spent too much time fighting these guys, so now the game's over. Like, why? Was she like tied to bombs that were going to go off if I didn't get to the next room in 30 seconds?
I don't know. It's just like, well, games have timers, so this game has to have a timer, and we haven't really shaken that yet.
Right. And how did you feel just about, like, forget the timer thing, but just progression throughout this game? Did you feel like you were, like, climbing the ladder of skill and difficulty and, like, being introduced to new things?
I did, but I also don't think I needed a built-in mechanism to feel that way. I mean, I'm going to learn the game as I play it. I'm going to realize that I'm getting better as the game goes on. I don't need the heart system.
Yeah, this is a game that does really well through repetition, too, though. I think it's just the right amount of simplicity meets, like, diversity in your movesets, which is why I wish you would have had it all to begin with.
Yeah.
That I didn't mind dying and starting over again, because it was only ever 2 enemies at a time on your screen. It's not this like fodder of enemies that you just have to figure out, like, well, how am I going to get through all this? And you can't get to the next stage until you beat them all and stuff like that. What's funny is that the 2 people on screen, 2 enemies on screen at one time was just a limitation of the NES. And it winds up working out in its benefit, I feel.
I think that it would have, at least, like, again, with diversity of experience, it would have been nice to be able to throw in a couple screens where you have to fight one enemy of one kind and another of the other kind. But obviously, we don't, because this is kind of a new genre right now. I don't really care about that. Because this is fresh enough that I don't care that I have to fight two duplicates of the same guy right now.
Right. And to be clear, I think that the two enemies on screen is the sweet spot in this kind of thing, because you can deal with one person on the left and one person on the right, and you do have to watch your back, but it's not overwhelming to the point where it's like there's four guys on screen and I'm barely understanding my placement on this Z-axis. It's I think
they will, if you're not careful, they will wobble you.
Yeah, and they do. I think there was something really funny that happened to me one time with one of them had a bat and the other one was just normal. And I was just fighting the guy with the bat because you want to disarm him and then you pick up you want to pick up the bat. And I would punch him, the bat would fall, and then the guy behind me would punch me, and then the guy with the bat would pick up the bat, and it just kept happening. It was like a Looney Tunes episode where then I proceed to, because he's in the middle of picking up the bat, so then I punch him in the face, and I just did that until he died, and then I took care of the other guy.
But that brings up another thing that we haven't seen before, and that's interactive items and tools that you can use here.
Another thing that, this is just looking back in hindsight, but another thing that I didn't look at the manual at all, but when I saw those objects, I just assumed I can pick this up, and I just assumed using the punch button. It's like, we take that for granted, but I think that's actually like just really good design decisions from this team to just know, like, no, you shouldn't hit select to pick up an object. Like, it should just be the same button that your fists are,
Exactly.
I really like that. And, for what it's worth, there's a good variety of things. I mean, I'm sure we could have asked for a little more, but I think, like, having the baseball bat and the whip and some of the bigger objects, you pick up a crate at some points. I like that there's also some weight to those bigger objects, too. But, those things help along the way because they almost make you feel like you're taking control over the situation once you disarm the person and now you have the bat.
And that level of interactivity with the with the level itself is sort of what makes me like a lot of these action titles and even the games outside of this genre. Like, I remember really enjoying, I don't remember which wrestling game it was, but whatever the wrestling game was where you can leave the ring and then go into the back and pick up a chair that was just sitting in the locker room or something.
Yeah, I mean, those were later N64 games and stuff like that, but those are perfect. Great example.
And just interactive battles in more recent games like Sleeping Dogs, where you can use a urinal and put their face in a urinal. Like, this is sort of that step one, and just that interactivity of the level design extends itself to how the actual surface you can walk on interacts with you as well. In the first level, you get into that weird conveyor belt area, and you can actually just kill your enemies. But not just by punching them, but by knocking them down on the conveyor belt, and they just fall to their death. I think that that's very creative, and it really increases my enjoyment of these kinds of games.
Yeah, I think if Renegade for us was impressive because we had Kung Fu to compare it to, then this game is just it's on the same scale of now. Kung Fu looks like something from Atari 2600 and Renegade looks like an early NES game.
And it really does look like from the 2600.
But there's an interactivity to the environment, but also it helps make it all feel more alive for an NES game.
Very
much.
Which
I think is pretty cool because right now we've seen a lot of and this is an interesting example, but in Wizards and Warriors, right, you go to a lot of different places and you see yourself move around on the map, but I never really felt like I was at any of those places. Mm-hmm. I'm jumping around on tree stumps, I'm in a cave, those things are happening, but when you're in Double Dragon, and even if you're at the castle at the end, which is kind of weird that there's all of a sudden a castle.
Fortress.
Okay, a hidden fortress. Or when you're in these caves, it's just having that stuff be available to you makes it all feel more alive.
Yeah, it has a sense of place, and it has a sense of maybe not being lived in. Like this isn't like an Elder Scrolls game, but
no, of course,
it definitely has more external logic and not just video game logic of enemy placement.
Yeah, it's as simple as like how in Super Mario Brothers, when you go down the pipe, it's like, cool, now I understand why I'm in the underground levels. Like sometimes you just need that connective tissue. That's what made Castlevania so great. Was
exactly.
That you understood where you were going, even if it was nonsensical. It was like, cool. I mean, like I feel like I just got out of that room and now I'm in the, I'm getting closer to the tower.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about the boss battles, because this was, for me, the moment where I remembered that I'm not good at beat 'em ups.
So what are we considering a boss battle?
I would start with even though he later just becomes a generic enemy, the Abadobo, I think his name is.
So the big, like, the thing looking guy.
Yes.
Okay.
And he shows up in the end of mission 1, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ababo is his name.
Adobo. Abobo?
Abobo.
Abobo. Okay.
Great. Abobo, Ababo.
Yeah.
Ababo, beep, bop. You know, that works too.
He definitely has the intimidation factor going for him. But I think... So this is the beginning of level 1, you said?
Yeah, that's what... You're still on the conveyor belt and everything at the end of this.
See, that was easy for me because that was the first time that I'm like, wait, I know that I can just beat him by knocking him down on the conveyor belt and I won't really have to fight him.
Right.
So... I think that later in the game, when you have to fight more than one, it just becomes like a regular goon.
Yeah.
Then it's harder and it's more annoying.
Yeah, I think that happens around
level 3?
Level 3, which is where you also start to see an excess of just like screens to get to things. Yeah. So like at first it was just like, all right, face 2 of these guys, move a little bit forward, face 4 of these guys, move a little bit forward, then 2 again. By level 3, you're facing like 5 of one thing, 3 of another thing, 4 of one thing, like it just keeps going. And then you have to fight the 2 Abobos, and that's like, for me, that's kind of like, I'm not good enough at this genre to deal with this. I just
spammed jump kicks.
Jump kicks are good. Yeah. I'm a fan of them.
They dodged most of them, but I was able to get out of the way of like a counterattack quickly enough.
Yeah, and that's worth mentioning too, the dodging thing. They're smarter AI for sure in the Abobos than in most of the other enemies. But, I'm not saying that the difficulty of these guys like makes it a worse game. I think it's just, it was the revealing factor to me that I was kind of like cruising for a while and not actually like being good at this genre or this game in specific.
Yeah. I think the first, I don't remember if this is mission 1 or mission 2, but after you climb up this building with a bunch of ladders.
That's mission 2, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
So you have like a mini boss, I guess, of the guy that, I don't know how to describe him. He's purple.
Yeah. His name in the manual is Chintai.
Okay.
And yes, he's the purple one, and that's after you fight the Lindas, which are the female characters of the game. I think that's really funny. It's like, what's a vicious name for a woman? Linda.
And I remember that was the first fight that, like, it didn't feel like I was just counting how many times I knocked him down, and then he should start flashing and go away soon. It actually felt like a brawl because I didn't know his pattern, and it was mostly just raw reaction time and that kind of experience. I don't know how you felt about that. Would you count that as a boss?
I would count that as a boss. It is the end of that mission. I would count a boss anything where like all of a sudden you're introduced to the next mission. Yeah. You know, you're facing him alone too. I think what was the only thing that was disappointing here was Chintai was another one that like I had trouble going up against. But when you look at like strategy guides on multiple different sites too, a lot of them have just figured out like very clever ways to like deal with this and stuff like that for almost all the enemies though. And it seems like it's like, well, is that the best way to play this game? And if so, I guess what I mean is like everybody kind of agrees that it'd be better to cheese on these people than it would ever be to actually fight them.
You know,
head on.
Yeah, the one way that I've seen to beat the second boss, this Chintai, which isn't even cheesing, it's just it's just a glitch of going down the building again, and he just despawns.
Oh right, okay, I remember seeing that one as well. That's actually considered like a secret. On some of the like guides, it's like, oh, did you know you could do this? Yeah. And I think it's fun. I'm fine with that stuff, and I'm fine with like figuring out the fastest ways to take enemies down. I meant that more as a comment of, is it like, does it say something about the game that no one's recommending like an actual way to just like
fighting him as you would?
Right. Be sure to dodge, like you can't dodge.
Yeah.
Be sure to guard, you can't guard. I think that's something that we haven't talked about yet, that we're not thinking about it because we haven't played enough of these. But if we ever play a game with guard, going back to something like this is going to be tough.
Yeah, that's true.
The ability to just like cross your arms and have some invincibility is nice. And they punish you in games with guard too. Like usually if you guard too much, like a third punch will still knock you down. Yeah. So I think this game could have used something like that, but I'm not sure how they would have done it.
I guess I didn't really think of this because when I played these games, I was never very good and I never guarded.
Right. I never knew, even in, say like Street Fighter 2 or something like that. Oh, yeah. I never thought to guard. It's really be difficult. Aggressive. Right?
Yeah, it's difficult to reprogram your mind like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that at this point, if we're going all the way to the bosses, we might as well go to the end of the game where the final boss, Willie, is the guy who kidnapped your girlfriend and everything like that. And in the arcade version, it was kind of crazy because you would fight him, but also like enemies would just keep spawning, but you had to take care of Willie. Like everybody else would just run off if he died.
Willie's the guy with the machine gun, right?
Yes. Okay. He's the only one with a gun in the game. And in the version here, though, it's Willie just shows up at the end after you've taken out like 2 Abobos, 2 Chintais, 2 Lindas, 2 like you have to
Williamses.
you have to take on like 2 of all of these types, and then finally you fight Willie, and he's by himself. And I just think that's interesting because in the arcade version, it was more of just like a try to survive.
Yeah. Well, again, like they can't put more than one kind of enemy on the screen, so they had to redesign that. But let's jump back a bit, and talk about the actual design of some of these levels.
Sure.
So level 1, it's pretty standard. It's pretty intuitive. It has, some nicks and crannies, but level 3, I almost just stopped playing the game because of level 3, because I didn't realize that after you fight the 2 Abobos that jump out of the cave, jump out of the mountain and turn it into a cave, that you shouldn't keep going right. Because the game the level just loops.
Right, with the platforms, right? After you get on those floating platforms.
That is level 3, but that's like the second part. So no,
you were talking about the part with the bridge.
Out when you're outside in the forest.
Yep.
You walk across the bridge, and then you fight some dudes that I don't know. They just look like they're wearing jeans.
Those are the Williams.
Okay,
but like I know what you're talking about. The bridge was what this is the bridge. But this is the bridge scene I was talking about earlier. And basically, that's the only like that for me was the recognition that something was
something was up. Okay.
Something was up.
Yeah. So I think there should be, because they give you the thumbs up to keep moving forward. But so maybe if it's going to be in a screen that has a cave, maybe like point to the cave.
Yeah, they don't imply that because the Abobos broke through to make those holes, that it was never implied that you should enter them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is very strange. And I think depending on like which one you enter, you also like enter a different part.
Yeah,
of the cave.
I went right into I think both times I played through this, I went into the purple cave with the falling stalactites, or is it stalagmites?
No idea, but it does say actually here somewhere. Hold on. Stalactites.
Stalactites, yes.
Yep. Which are mandatory in caves, it seems like at this point in NES games. There has to be something that falls that if you get close to it, it just starts falling.
Exactly.
The platforms were weird, though, because they look like they were taken out of, like, Contra or something like that.
It's also weird to just see platforming in this game.
It shouldn't be there, in my opinion. But yeah, then there's also like a whole nother part to this cave too, with some waterfalls and stuff like that. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. But I do agree that it is a little strange that if you don't go into those holes, you will just loop back and come across the bridge again. And I think that's why the bridge is probably there to remind you of like, hey, you noticed you've been doing this, right? Like
it should just stop. It should just stop.
It should stop
right there.
If there's a thumb that tells you to keep going, that thumb should also like be able to like point into the cave or use an index finger.
Point with your thumb, yeah.
Right. Well, as usually it's thumb for the other thing. Like get out of here. Like you're good. For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, it's literally just a giant thumb that like appears on the screen.
Instead of like an arrow that says you can go to the next screen, now it's just a thumb.
Yeah, it's like hitching a taxi ride.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts on the level design?
So were we just going to talk about the final level as its own thing?
Yes, that's what I was getting to.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay, cool. So you're calling it a hidden fortress. I'm calling it this weird like dungeon cave. It's just so unfitting for the rest of the game. But I guess going into a cave was weird enough. So like naturally you would lead up into like this place filled with skulls and Mike Wazowski eyes.
This is like organized crime. Obviously, you're going to find this stuff.
Right. Where else are you going to see this stuff? And really, what kills me here, it's not that, like, you want to talk about that bricks thing?
I think we have to at least acknowledge it, that it's just the cheapest thing. I don't think it has any kind of, I don't think it has a pattern.
It says, no enemies appear to welcome you, but this is just a trick to lull you into a false sense of confidence. The wall itself is actually your enemy here.
Is this like a game FAQ? Or?
This is a strategy wiki.
Oh, okay.
That like I prefer to use these because they include pictures and stuff like that for these NES games, like right next to them. But I just love that it's like, there's little you can do to prepare yourself except to wait and move as soon as a brick returns to the wall. Stand by the left column and wait for the first brick to pop out. As soon as it's done, move to the right. You may even choose to jump as you go. It may or may not help.
None of my advice here may do you any good.
It's crazy because the platforms were already like a weird thing, but they weren't bad. Like they were pretty easy to land on, and there was only 3 of them.
They don't ask too much of you.
Yeah. This, on the other hand, it's if this was Super Mario Brothers, it'd be very easy to handle this.
Get some momentum.
The jump is great in that. In this, we didn't complain about the jump like we usually do because it doesn't matter so much. It's inconsequential. Yeah, exactly. Now all of a sudden we've been robbed by it. I don't have much more to say. It's just it's wonky that it's here, but it's not like it's probably the hardest thing in this if you've made it to this point, because after that you're just fighting the same 2 enemies over and over again.
I wouldn't say that's the hardest because now this turns into just like a gauntlet level. Like these levels have been getting exponentially longer as you progress through them, and I never got through level 4 because just when you get to the like arena areas, they just keep spawning, and there isn't even a delay. They just like, oh, you beat one. Stage left, here comes another one. Stage right, here comes another one.
Right, and that's during it's kind of like it's a maze, but you're like going up to the top of the castle.
Yeah, And so, like, you have these new moves, like you can jump on their chest and like just get rid of them quickly. But now that they're spawning so quickly, they can just interrupt you, and it's definitely by design. Like, this is supposed to be harder. You're not supposed to be able to beat this game in an hour, but it's definitely a different experience than the relative like power fantasy of level 1.
Right. And I don't have anything to add to that other than that the infinite spawn is real. There really is one that will just continue to generate them as long as you stay in the area. So you really do want to just get out of there. And then it eventually brings you to like the area where you start to see these the dragon head, which I guess is the only indication of like why this game is called Double Dragon.
Double is a dragon. Is there a second one?
No, there's not.
Oh.
And there won't be unless you consider, I guess, whatever that door is behind you in the final fight.
Yeah, 2 dragons.
To be a second dragon, but I'm not upset. I mean, there was an indication. There was no indication that you'd be fighting dragons or anything like that.
It's just a cool name, and it gets a pass. So.
I think also on the like box of the game,
there are 2 dragons.
There are 2 dragons,
right,
and
yeah.
on the title screen of not the NES one, but of some of them, there are 2 dragons.
Well, on the title screen of the NES one, it does say Double Dragon.
Right. Well, it's important to say the name of the game in the title, but in every other version that I'm seeing here, in the Amiga version, in the Amstrad CPC version, in the arcade version, there's always 2 dragons.
It's just sort of a misnomer, sort of anachronism sort of thing, because obviously it was called that because it's 2 fighters, like it's a 2-player game, but that doesn't exist in this version.
Okay, but now I'm actually kind of pissed because the Game Boy version even has the 2 dragons on the title screen, but all we get is just text that says Double Dragon, and then I guess Double Dragon
like
in
Japanese
kanji
characters
as well. Yeah. And some flames. Cool.
I like
sure those
flames.
dragons made them.
Yeah.
They're just slightly off screen. You just can't see them right now. Anyway, so we talked about the fight against Willie, and that's cool and everything. He's got a machine gun. He's going to kill you. You kill him, and you think the game is over, and you would never know this, because it's NES graphics, and you would never think about this unless you ever played like a 2-player co-op version of the game. But your brother Jimmy shows up.
It's true.
And surprises you and says, well, actually, I love this woman too, and I want to be the one who rescues her, so now I'm going to fight you to the death.
Well, here's the thing, Mike, and you've got a weird idea of this, and it proves to me that you didn't read the manual, because this manual spoils the game and just says, this is your brother. He's the leader of the Black Dragon Club or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like, well, thanks. I would have liked to
it does say
learn
that
myself.
Just so no one thinks that Sean's crazy here, and I'll explain why I thought what I thought. It says, Billy must pursue the gang through the slums, factories, and wooded outskirts of the city to reach the hideout for his final confrontation with the shadow boss, his brother, Jimmy. That's crazy. Because what I was trying to get to was that in the arcade version of the game, if you beat Willie, the game ends, and you take, I I don't know, is her name Maria or something? Like,
Probably.
you take her and you walk off, and that's great. If you're playing co-op in the arcade version, after you beat Willie, it says fight to the death. And now you actually must, like Mortal Kombat Street Fighter style, fight the other person you've been playing with the entire time, who's your brother, and the two of you now fight, and whoever wins, whether it's Jimmy or Billy, whoever wins gets the cutscene with Maria.
I had no idea. That's fun.
There's a great article online. I'll link it in the show notes about like the shocking twist of the arcade version of Double Dragon, and just think about like what a mindfuck that would be for like two kids that are playing this game at the arcade,
to fight you.
And all of a sudden it says like you know, it's like that scene in The Dark Knight where the Joker breaks the stick, the billiard stick, and he's like, we're accepting applications and we're only taking one.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Maria's only got enough love for one of you, so the other one must kill their brother.
Maria's a monster.
And we don't even know if that's her name.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Wow, okay, yeah. Turns out you should read the manuals, kids.
True.
Because in this one, they just outright change it to having him be the shadow boss. They do that because in the co-op version of this game, it's not co-op at all. It's Super Mario Brothers style, where when someone dies, then the other player just plays as their variant sprite.
They do have, moving on to, unless there's something we want to talk about, like the actual game first, but the Mode B. I think I read that Mode B is like a tech demo of a scrapped version of the game.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't read anything about that, but
so
I'm interested.
Basically, Mode B is a version of the game where it's got better graphics.
Yeah, it's noticeable too, like that they have more detail.
And it's just a one-on-one fighting game. It's a little janky, but the other technical limitation is you can't fight another player. You have to fight a copy of whoever you're playing as.
Right.
But you do get to do like a character select. But apparently that was supposed to be what the game was supposed to look like. And there would be a multiplayer, but I guess they found it to be too difficult to implement at this time. Got
it. Now, are you saying that because I've played the arcade version, and I do think that the sprites in this Mode B look a lot closer to the arcade version.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying in relation to like how things should look? Or are you saying that at one point this game was going to be a one-on-one fighter?
No. I think this might be apocrypha. Like, it may not be true at all, but what I've read is that the game was supposed to be the kind of game that it is, like a side-scrolling brawler, but that would have been multiplayer, and it would have looked a lot more like Mode B.
Got it. Well, for what it's worth, I'm down for 32-year-old rumors. You know, like, if they still can't be confirmed or denied at this point, let's just bring them on. Mode B is interesting, though, I will give it that, but, you know, we're not quite there in the one-on-one fighting thing yet.
But hey, this is like HD compared to...
Yeah. It's actually, like, crazy to then see, like, wow, Billy looks like that. Like, even just having the choose your character screen is just like it's so different than like what we've dealt with so far, where it's like an afterthought mode of, you know, in Trojan there was Capcom's first attempt at like a one-on-one fighting style game, and it's like weird because that guy goes on to make Street Fighter, same developer, but at the same time it's like nothing's there, you know. It's other than just the idea of killing your opponent on a...
Wasn't there a character select in what was that stupid wrestling game?
There was a few.
The really stupid one.
Tag Team Wrestling?
No, the one with like the...
Muscle?
Like, muscle.
Yeah, maybe. But that's different. Those are wrestling games. I don't think of those as like what I mean is this is like an entirely different game where like all of a sudden you have a whole new mode where you can just do like you know, one-on-one combat, but that's not why you bought the game. No. It's just like an additional thing.
It's a nice little bonus.
Yep. So I was able to find one thing from Yoshihisa Kishimoto, who was the creator of both Renegade and Double Dragon. He wound up doing everything that is involved with Double Dragon, and it seemed like in the interview he was like, I wish that didn't happen. Like, I wish I could have broken free and done my own thing, and now he is doing his own thing. But the only thing I can find from him is that this whole thing, like, may or may not have been related, like, to a bad breakup he had. And this is what made him, like, make these style games. He said that he got into fights in school on a daily basis, which in retrospect was partially the result of a rough breakup. There were family reasons as well, but there was a girl and she dumped me, which pulled the trigger, he says.
I mean, okay.
He's the one saying this. It's him saying that. We're not putting words in his mouth.
No, I get that.
It's just weird to think that a game where you rescue your girlfriend comes from a guy who had a bad breakup and just wants to fight people.
I don't know. I feel like this is sort of like, I'm not saying he's a liar. I'm saying that he sounds like he's ascribing a little too much subtext to a very basic and generic premise.
I got you.
It's like, how many games so far have started with somebody kidnapping somebody, you have to go get them.
Right,
it's
right.
Like it's been as far back as Kung Fu.
Right, right.
So who cares? That's not. Don't tell the story if it's not really that interesting.
Look, it's just been a while since we had some interviews. I thought,
sure.
Hey, I found this thing. Let's do that.
No, I appreciate it.
But I think we're ready to move on to our feature segment. Of this. It wasn't the gameplay. It wasn't talking about anything regarding that.
It's Double Dragon Battletoads.
It's sequels and spin-offs.
There it is.
Okay. There's 2 more NES games coming to Double Dragon, and that is Double Dragon 2, The Revenge, and Double Dragon 3, The Rosetta Stone.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a language learning game where you'll learn Italian and Japanese and all that stuff in Double Dragon. But we won't talk about those because we'll play them. So that's kind of cool. On the Super Nintendo, we get Super Double Dragon, which it now finally puts in a guard button for blocking attacks. But that makes me nervous because does that mean that they don't do anything different in Double Dragon 2 and 3 to make them... Like,
I know that they do already, so
Great.
But I won't say it.
Okay, cool. I'm glad that you've been playing ahead.
I haven't been playing.
No,
I just read ahead.
So we had Double Dragon 2, Double Dragon 3, Super Double Dragon. Here's where things get complicated. After that, we get Double Dragon 5, The Shadow Falls. But,
where did 4 go?
Yeah, where did 4 go? Okay.
Wait, no. 4 was Super.
Was it, though?
I think it was.
Okay, but wait for it. All right. So that's Double Dragon 5. It's on the Super Nintendo, and it's no longer a beat-em-up. It's just a head-to-head fighting game based on the Double Dragon animated series in the style of like a Street Fighter 2 like game, So it very much is almost like just a clone of Super Street Fighter 2.
I don't like that.
All right. Then Double Dragon Neo Geo.
Nice.
Okay. Head-to-head fighter again.
Oof.
Not based on the cartoon this time, though. Based on the movie. We'll get to that. It was Technos Japan's last Double Dragon game before the company went into business. And it's also their final arcade game for Double Dragon altogether. Then Double Dragon goes into a lull for a while. We don't hear from it. The movie kind of killed it altogether. And we get Double Dragon Neon for the 360 and PS3, which is a reboot.
Hold on. You skipped Double Dragon X Battletoads.
I know I skipped Double Dragon X Battletoads.
Why?
Because we didn't talk about Battletoads yet. There's not enough context.
What are you talking about? It's a sequel/spin-off. We have to mention it.
I know. It's just like there's just not enough context for certain fans yet. Some people don't know if GameStop carries Battletoads or not, We just don't know these things yet.
Whatever, Mike.
No, I think...
Is there a Battletoads for NES?
There is a Battletoads for NES. It's made by Rare. The people that made Slalom. Yeah, there is a Battletoads for NES, and Battletoads Double Dragon is a game that will come out on the Super Nintendo. It's a very unlikely crossover, but it's a completely original game featuring both of those franchises, and honestly makes me wish for more unlikely team-ups. Like, who was asking for that? Where was, Ninjavania, where the Ninja Gaiden series crosses over with Castlevania and they both have to team up to destroy Dracula. Like, that would have been great, right?
I will admit that Battletoads Double Dragon, or whatever the actual title is my only past experience with Double Dragon.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah.
And what'd you think of that game?
I thought it was fun.
Great. So there you go. There's our review.
Yeah.
Fun, not essential. Double Dragon Neon is a 360 PS3 game. It's a reboot of the series, and it's done by Arc System Works, those guys who now do all of those other fighting games.
Ooh, those other fighting games.
Don't they do like Fighter Z, Dragon Ball Fighter Z, and the Persona games and stuff, the fighting versions of those? Yeah, they do that. They do Dragon Ball Fighters, Guilty Gear XRD, BlazBlue,
Okay, so just all the weeb ones.
Yeah, short thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 45 more apparently too. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, but Guilty Gear is definitely, I think, what got them started. Because Double Dragon Neon was not favorable and did not do well, and so you would think that would be the end, but we have a loose end to fill, and that's Double Dragon 4 finally comes out very recently. They were like, oh, we never got to 4. What happens in 4? Well, don't worry about it, because if you play Double Dragon 4 on your PS4 or your Nintendo Switch, it'll explain everything. See, Double Dragon 4 takes place shortly after Double Dragon 2, The Revenge.
Okay.
Even though it's Double Dragon 4, but Double Dragon 3 is either a prequel or a way in the future sequel to all of these games, and Double Dragon 5, remember, doesn't exist. There's no 5. That's just a fighting game based on the movie. 4 takes place between 2 and maybe 3, and 1 is the first.
You see, Double Dragon 4 is the game in which Xehanort comes in and actually takes his dreams and turns them into Double Dragon 5, but not before. You're supposed to interrupt me.
No, all right, that's great.
Yeah.
Sorry. I will interrupt you to let you know that Double Dragon 4, also not that well received, and uses an actual 8-bit art style.
8-bit?
Not like that, like Shovel Knight style, like, oh, this looks great. It kind of looks like Double Dragon 1.
I appreciate
and it's on PS4 and Switch, so...
$60.
Yeah, look forward to that. I don't think it's $60, but I promise you, listeners at home, I am not joking with you when I say this is like a widescreen version. It's a 16:9 version of Double Dragon 1 with more enemies and all that stuff, but because they can fit more
and all that jazz.
This is not every game in the Double Dragon series, but we have some other episodes to do with them, so we're going to leave it at that. But it is worth mentioning some non-related game things, like the Double Dragon comics. Okay?
Yeah.
They were released by Marvel.
Now is it... Oh, it's Marvel, not like a manga.
No, yeah, it's Marvel. It's nice. American comics.
Nice, strong American comic.
It portrays the dragons not as skilled martial artists, but as generic superheroes who get their powers from some sort of artifact.
All right, that's stupid.
Or statue or thing. But it's notable because this reveals that Jimmy Lee and Billy Lee, their dad is Stan Lee. That's the change that they made in this one. Stan Lee is their father in this comic series.
I appreciate that. I thought you said that they were going to join the Avengers. But...
No, that would have been funny. Then you have Double Dragon, the board game. Okay?
Wow.
Would love to get my hands on this board game, but it's apparently one of the worst of all time and is just impossible to find. No one's even selling it right now.
For sure.
The winner of Double Dragon, the board game, is the first player to successfully fight his or her way around the game board to Jimmy's hideout to rescue Marian, who I guess is Maria.
So this is based on the NES version?
Yes.
Okay.
You will pass through the slum section, the industrial section, the forest section, and the hideout section on the rocky road to victory.
The rocky road.
Then there's Double Dragon, the cartoon. Okay?
Okay.
If you're following along, this is the TV show. The premise of the show is that the protagonist brothers are separated at birth. They never know what to do with these brothers and explain why they're dragons. Billy is raised by an elderly martial arts master known as the Oldest Dragon. Not the Elder Dragon, the Oldest Dragon. And his brother Jimmy is raised by the evil Shadow Master as his second in command, the Shadow Boss. As a result, the Lee brothers oppose each other as adults. But when Jimmy is betrayed by the Shadow Master, he renounces his evil ways and joins his brother as a dragon warrior, which is a different game.
Yeah, it's Dragon Warrior Monsters next, right?
Yeah. During the course of the series, the brothers recruit allies in their war against the Shadow Master and his henchmen. The futile search for their father, John Lee, is a subplot throughout the series. Not
channel?
Stanley.
What channel did this air on?
I'll take a look for you. Let's see. In the meantime, you can tell me if you've ever seen the Double Dragon movie.
I've never seen the Double Dragon movie.
Did you know that it exists?
I had a feeling that it did, but not. I feel like that may have just been like a Bernstein Bears thing, where it's just like, oh, it probably. Now that you say that it exists, I must have heard of it before.
So I got a weird answer here for the TV show. It says that
it's on the CW.
No, it said BKN Network, which is like Bobot or something like that, which I don't think we ever got in.
What is that?
Yeah, like I don't think. Yeah, it says like it just said, it doesn't really say like where it started, but like that doesn't. Bobot feels like the production company, not the network.
Yeah.
So I can't really find out
Hallmark
where this
channel.
aired. But if I had to take a guess, it would have to be like on like
ESPN.
Yeah, ESPN. Yeah, because it's martial arts, and ESPN the Ocho always plays martial arts, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
This episode's really going off the rails, but we have to talk about the movie real fast because the movie's plot concerns Shuko.
Okay.
No idea who that is. Doing all he can to acquire the Double Dragon.
The Double Dragon.
The Double Dragon.
Okay.
In this one, so Shuko is like the main villain. The Double Dragon is a medallion, and he only has half of it. The other half is with the Lees. So they have to this is now finally, after the long wait, we finally understand. Thanks to this movie, which apparently is even worse than the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Wow.
We finally find out why this whole thing was ever called Double Dragon to begin with.
That's fun. Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's watch that.
Yeah, we should watch that and do an episode on it, or just do DVD commentary that people can watch with in sync. All right, I think I've had enough here. This got off the rails at the end, but let's not forget that we did like this game.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's take it to the essential games list. Forget that they don't actually ever explain what a double dragon is, whether that's like a cat dog thing where like two dragons or technically one dragon, but both have a face. Just don't pay any attention to that. That shouldn't affect whether this game makes it on the essential games list. What's your verdict?
So, Mike, I think that like your concern about the Double Dragon, you're sort of projecting that onto me. Like, I'm totally okay with it just being a cool name. But in terms of the game itself, I think that this is the most modern game that we've played so far. At least in terms of its feel, aside from maybe like something as classic as a Super Mario. But I know that we're going to play more iterations of this kind of game in this IP. But right now, I think that like I had so much fun with this that I can't rightfully not vote for it. So I'm going to vote for it to be an essential game.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. As you were starting to talk, I had the feeling that you might vote this essential just now. Not even like in the past or anything like that. Just right here with your speech. And then that made me think, like, what are the rules when there's two people on the podcast to vote for the game?
You have to vote for it.
Okay, so it's not like it's now essential.
No, we went past that 50% mark. It has to be 51%.
Got it. Okay, so it's either all or nothing right here on me.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I did not make a decision before this episode.
Okay.
If you're asking me right now if I think this game is essential, I think that you have made the best case for this game to be on the essential games list right now. And I think that I've never really thought about them like that as we were going through them. Like, I never thought about, like, let's put games on here for now, and then we'll take them off eventually.
Look, I'm not saying that we should take it off. I'm just saying that I know that a lot of times we argue about what is and is not an essential game.
Yes.
And it ends up being like, well, you could play the next game that comes out.
Right.
That's Joe's voice.
Yeah. He does sound like that in real life. Don't forget about what you hear on the podcast. That's usually what his voice is like.
But I was just going to get in front of that and say, I know that we might play something better, but for now, I say this is essential.
I think that I said some things on the Best of 87 episode that about Stinger, where I was like, right now, It's one of the best we got.
Yeah.
I know it might not be later on, and we might remove it when that day comes, but right now, it is one of the best shmups, and that's why I think it's on there. So if we're being honest, Double Dragon isn't just the best beat-em-up. That's obvious.
It's the beat-em-up.
It's the beat-em-up right now. It's also one of the best games on the system right now.
Yeah.
And so even though this is a pretty, like, big reach for an essential game, I think that if I look at everything else that's on there right now, Double Dragon's welcomed.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm not so sold that it'll be there on episode 700 and whatever when we're done. But right now, it actually feels good being on there. Double Dragon, for me, also gets a bonus point for never getting to the point where I didn't feel like shit replaying it again.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of NES games where they are difficult or they're not difficult. They're just like have, you know, frustrating things that make you start over. And there's something about like, okay, now you're playing this NES game all over again that is just very demanding for a person who's used to, like, nowadays you die and you checkpointed back 5 seconds ago. You know, like there's something about that, and I think Double Dragon never for me got stale like that, and I could see myself playing this game as we continue to play other games too. You know, I always use Balloon Fight and Gradius as examples of games that I just continue to just boot up whenever I have a moment to just play some NES games. And so I think Double Dragon, because I did not beat this game yet, could be one of those games that like I'm going to continue to try to get at.
Got to get a little bit farther.
So it's an essential game for right now. We'll check in with Joe and Sean, see what they think. But
my name's Sean.
Joe and Sam, and see what they think. But most importantly, we want to know what you guys think. Do you think this is an essential game or not? Please write to us on the Twitter, where we have NostalgiaCast.
Yeah. And also ask us like whether you think that we undermined the rest of the podcast by only being 2 people and voting it essential. Like, was this a quorum? Do you agree?
Will I sometimes, like, or in the future maybe host a podcast late at night by myself where I do an emergency future episode that is just about the essential games list and I reorganize it to my likings? Maybe. Maybe not.
I think
we
that
live
we need
in
to
a
have
society.
2 people.
We are the only 2 people that have been on for 103 episodes, so we're allowed to have a power trip every now and again.
Exactly.
And that's what you just saw here, people. A hostile takeover of the essential games list where, and Sean doesn't have a gun to my head right now.
I don't.
And I am not in danger.
I've never had a gun to Mike's head ever, once, ever, never.
Sean, you've never even held a gun.
Never.
Never. And if you've never held a gun, hit us with a like button on Twitter. Hit us with a big fat like on one of our older posts pre 6 months ago.
And if you have held a gun, comment.
Comment if you've held a gun. Like if you haven't held a gun. Retweet if you're into the idea of holding a gun but just haven't done it yet.
And actually, what's the other one? Share. Wait, that's retweet. Also retweet if you've held a gun but never wanted to.
No, DM us if you want to know the essential games list, like where it's at right now, because the website's down for good.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
There used to be a thank you page. Now it's just like a redirect.
Oof.
Because we didn't pay for it.
Okay.
No, we just didn't pay for the...
Like to GoDaddy.
Yeah, so now like I'm going to try to buy it again, and it's going to be swooped by some cyber bully who's like, you know... It's $6,000, you idiot. And I'm like,
if you're the people that are now squatting on our webpage, please just, give us a DM. We can talk through this and hopefully we can get this back from you at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I'd like to state for the record that no one's squatting on it and we didn't lose it unwillingly. We gave it up. The Raspberry Pi is listening. You can find me at Esposito Film on Twitter, and I'll talk to you soon.